Umesh, Shookan is going to talk to us about AI-driven digital transformation. I think it's a hugely topical, current, and very interesting topic. Umesh joins us today as a cybersecurity and ICT operations leader whose work spans auditing, governance, risk, and emerging technologies. Umesh is known for his extensive experience as an ethical hacker. Now, that is an interesting job, which tends to make a few of us in the office slightly uneasy. Umesh brings a sharp, real-world perspective to digital security, and for this session, I'm going to say, do sit back, enjoy. I'm sure you'll be hooked. Umesh, over to you.
AI agents will help humans make AI agents have artificial general intelligence. That in turn will help make artificial superintelligence. We're on the cusp of an information explosion. Though the excitement of being the best performing business or the most powerful nation might outweigh the longevity of humanity.
This is really me. We are talking AI-driven digital transformation today. It'll be in 3 parts: the basics, the challenges, and the approaches.
Looks like we might just be having a
Hi, everyone.
challenge. There we go. Thank you.
Can you guys hear me? Okay, all right. Are you guys hearing me clearly?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great, thanks. So this is really me. That was me, but it wasn't me. I created that video out of a picture that I scraped off the internet of myself. All right, so let's get into it. So we're looking at AI-driven digital transformation, and I refer to it as AIDT. And we'll talk about digital transformation first before we go into the AI integrated part. All right, let's look at some definition on digital transformation. There are many good definitions, but basically digital transformation is integrating AI or any emerging technology into your business, business operations, supporting its strategy. Okay. I can say this is my definition, but actually no. It's not my definition. I didn't create that. I didn't even create the pictures on the slide. Everything is AI generated. Let's look at an academic definition. AI-driven digital transformation is a strategic organization-wide integration of AI into digital infrastructures. I'd like to say this is my academic decision, but again, no, it's not. Maybe you'd believe I asked 2 transformers for these definitions. They look pretty good, but actually the citations are wrong. Some of those citations don't exist, or they are for completely different articles. But I like to think that AI-driven digital transformation is quite simply digital transformation on the next level. Traditionally, we've had things like moving to cloud. Many of you in business for many years would know the buzz around moving from traditional IT infrastructure to cloud. And now we're just at the next level of that. Now we're moving to AI. And this impacts business decisions, business strategies, business leaders. You are dependent on technology, but you also want to fully exploit technology to bring out your business's core competencies. Okay. All right, let's go through the basics. This stuff most people already know, but some basic due diligence should be involved in an AI digital transformation initiative. And the top row of pictures gives you that workflow. Really, you need to understand the type of AI tools out there. You need to determine what use cases work for your business. You need to accumulate the right skills and tools, as well as when you are implementing AI or AI systems, it has to be done in a sustainable way, as well as having some measurement and monitoring over it, and very importantly, having the right type of guardrails around that implementation. Guardrails really, because there's been lots of examples of how AI implementations go wrong. And I think the industry learns as these incidents occur. All right, current challenges. Okay, so if we look at the detail, all right, we are done with the intro stuff. I'm going to get into some detail now. I've put down some primary concepts that any business leader that is looking at implementing AI should consider. This is not a comprehensive list, by the way. I think these are key, though. In system development, if you have an IT department, technical leaders, AI enthusiasts promising how the business strategy can change and how productivity can increase significantly, that's all true. And there's a whole life cycle to that development of AI systems, and that needs to be considered. But along with these concepts, you got to have some mitigating controls to avoid negative impacts to the business. Over here, you'd look at data quality, you'd look at transparency of data, you'd have the right guardrails implemented throughout the whole development cycle. And if you think about the whole data governance concept, it's almost fully encapsulated within the AI development cycle. Then if you have AI systems developed within your business, you have to consider acceptable uses. So you might have employees that have the availability of AI tools to use, and what would be considered acceptable uses of such AI systems. That needs to be considered. There should be some kind of monitoring of how the AI is used. Is it not abused? As well as look at things like social engineering and so on. Okay, AI anxiety, obsolescence. Yes, that's a real thing. It's the fear of AI taking over your jobs and you becoming obsolete. That's a real fear that should be considered when implementing AI and looking at digital transformations. Some things that can be done there, you'd look at awareness, you'd look at training, you'd look at impact mitigation. Impact mitigation is really looking at if AI is going to impact a department, you'd be looking at how those human resources could be redeployed. And this is an important one. It really is an important one in terms of organizational transformation, because this is a real fear that needs to be dealt with. Okay. All right. Sorry about that. Unconstrained AI mandates. Here you'd be looking at AI being given certain mandates to perform certain processes, certain decision making, and so on. This needs to be monitored closely, because if not monitored and unconstrained, then you are putting a lot of faith and responsibility in the hands of AI without oversight. So it needs to be monitored. If you look at AI risk and representation, here all the risks related to AI need to be considered in the implementation. And when it comes to representation, here you talk about reputational damage if the AI starts misrepresenting you. This could be AI chatbots, it could be virtual assistants or representatives. These need to be considered very carefully in the deployment stages. AI security and AI governance. This is a critical part and the main focus of this presentation. AI security and governance really takes typical normal security and governance that we are familiar with and adds an AI dimension to that. Okay. If you look at AI now, there's a whole set of new, what they call attack surfaces. And this could be a chatbot. This could be an AI data entry process. And those are new places that can get exploited. So that needs to be considered as a major part of the AI systems development. Okay, the big question for me is, how do we secure AI implementations in the business in a sustainable way from humans, from people? And the reason why I say from people initially is because it is us people that are implementing systems with or without guardrails. That's a typical danger that happens. You get the over-eager techies, the over-eager employees that don't consider the dangers of using AI and where you put your data and how decisions are made and so on. So that's a major question, I would say. Further than us people and how we implement AI, once AI is implemented, you'd want to consider or monitor how much decision-making power AI agents have. And this could be things like an AI agent could start questioning or justifying its own self-preservation. And we've seen some examples like that quite popularly over the internet and news and so on. Also, it gets to a point where AI interactions become unknown. And it's also fairly well documented in some cases now, where the decision-making process of AI agents is unknown to us. It's basically what is called a black box. There's an input and an output, and we don't know exactly how it gets from input to output. And in some cases, that can be bad. Okay. The big challenge, this is what I look at from a business point of view. You want AI to do good for your business. You want your business to become very productive. You want to exploit AI to the maximum. And the challenge is to do that responsibly. Okay. How do you do it responsibly? You look at your organization as is. How do you transform it? How do you integrate a digital workforce? A digital workforce is really introducing bots or agents into your environment. It might be a matter now of increasing data center space and adding a few more thousand digital workers. And digital workers or agents really, you could say that they do a particular job almost perfectly. They don't need to sleep or eat or take lunch, and they can work 24/7 and so on. And so that's the digital workforce of the future. And we need to be able to integrate digital resources with human resources responsibly. If we look at security, the typical words used in security is your cybersecurity, privacy, confidentiality, integrity, availability. All this applies to AI systems and the use or development of such systems. It just increases quite drastically now because AI has significant potential, capability, and speed. Okay. Other topics like intellectual property and source rights become debatable. Okay, standard approaches. As with any IT governance, cybersecurity, as time goes on, we find out about new breaches, new exploits, etc. And there's typically a lag, understandably, in governance from emerging technologies. Emerging technologies, these things happen very fast. Some companies are first adopters and they adopt new technologies very quickly. Some companies are late adopters and they wait for all the learnings to happen. But when mistakes make it through to completed systems and we find out about it, that's when usually industry organizations start making amendments to good practice frameworks and standards and so on. Okay. Some of these standards out there for AI implementations, there's the NIST AI RMF, there's the EU AI Act, there's the OECD principles, ISO, and various other frameworks. In fact, there are, you could say, hundreds of frameworks across the globe. And typically when companies try to do some kind of good practices in IT, they follow some of these standards, the ISO certifications or the NIST or local and regional laws, etc. Some words you'd hear in all these frameworks, things like govern, detect, limitations, fairness, accountability, and so on. These are fairly important items to consider. Okay. So what I've done is I've provided a framework, and this is the result of a paper that I've been writing. It's a meta-synthesis of the literature and the actual cases that are documented in recent times, more specifically the last 3 or 4 years. And it's aimed at the executive who's not the AI expert. The executive that becomes accountable when something goes wrong, but then gets surprised as to how AI systems were implemented in a specific way that allowed for certain things to be, for certain items to go wrong. Okay. And that's where we must consider a simple framework for executives. And such a framework would typically, sorry, give me a sec. And such a framework needs to empower the executive to say, okay, do I know the right questions to ask even if you're not an expert and you know your IT or your technology team is implementing AI and it all looks good on the surface of it, do you know the right questions to ask to get the kind of comfort you need as an executive? Okay, so those close to IT or moved from IT to business or the other way around would be familiar with a term called shift left. Shift left basically means that if you have tedious tasks that employees are doing on a daily basis, and that can be automated, move it off the table, let it get automated, and free up time to do something more productive. That's the idea. The Shift AI framework is meant to be a tool that you can use, and it's simply shift left, but now with AI as the emerging technology that must be considered. Okay, you could look at it as AI for non-AI experts, and there's some rules of thumb. So I've taken all these different types of considerations that must be looked at. We've had a number of reported quite famous cases across the world in recent times where AI was used in business processes and resulted in issues. One example is a major global company producing a report that had fake citations. Another is an important legal case where the AI started citing fake cases, and as well as bias in hiring practices, etc., based on bad training data. So there's a lot of these examples. Okay, so the model that we'd be looking at, and I wouldn't spend too much time on this. It's fairly easy. You are welcome to take a snap of this, use it, but don't forget to give me credit. It's meant for the business leader, okay? The first part of the model is shift, and this part deals with the implementation and design of AI. The second part of it is the AI part, which deals with the management and the oversight of AI. Shift standing for sustainability, humanism, incorruptibility, fairness, and transparency. AI for accountability and intendency. Sustainability, you want to make sure the implementation is secure. You want it to be resilient and available, and you want to make sure it's efficient and optimized. So no wasteful activity and no insecure loopholes. And if it goes down, you want it to be available, especially if it is a system dealing with critical processes, maybe in health, maybe in certain other critical environments. Humanism, this is not really referring to the typical definition relating to humanism in terms of humans being reliant on humans and not gods. But maybe in the future, people will start believing in AI gods. But here, humanism really refers to ensuring that the environment is sustained and ensuring that AI systems are human-centered. Human-centered being very critical in this formula. Incorruptibility, you want to make sure that there are boundaries, limitations, and fail-safe protocols. Fairness, there should be mitigation against biases, non-discrimination, and equitable access. Equitable access really refers to, at the moment, the leaders of AI systems, I would say, is in the global north. But the global south are significant adopters as well, but access may not be as available. So that might relate to that, etc. Transparency, We'll be looking at awareness. You could be speaking to a AI agent, you wouldn't know it. I could be an AI bot right now talking to you. There are these systems that allow for live. I could change my face and talk to you in real time, but you'd be seeing another face right now. So awareness really deals with disclosure. Disclose to the audience, the user of the system, that they are speaking to an AI. Transparency, this comes down to the black box example, and explainable AI. So every decision that an AI system makes must be explainable. If you are not sure how a decision is being made, then I would say that's a concern. That's a worry. Okay. For the management and oversight of AI, this part is probably the most critical of this model: accountability and intendency. If this is a Zoom meeting, and let's just say I've got a digital twin, which is what it's called now, a digital twin to do this meeting for me. And everyone is happy, discussing, making notes, making decisions. But at some point in time, if something goes wrong, if there's any kind of negligence, you'd want to know who should be accountable. Because me as an individual has given some agency to an AI bot, and there's questions around that. And the audience or other attendees in a meeting have decided it's okay to speak to an agent of myself. But when things go wrong, it becomes difficult to actually talk about accountability, auditability, responsibility, and so on. Intendency, this really refers to the intent to ensure there is human agency over AI systems. There must be oversight and supervision even of the managers of an AI system. Because what you want to know is, are AI systems being developed and managed with the right principles and ethics? Okay. And that's the model. Okay. So just before we go into the Q&A, I've done something in parallel while presenting this meeting. And that relates to using AI either for good or for bad. What we need to understand is many business processes, we may know it well. There's also many tools that we can use, and employees are currently using them, or people in general, for personal use. But what AI does is it now boosts that productivity significantly. So I have done a deep search on getting information on 2 volunteers in this meeting. The search was completed in the first 10 minutes of the conference, and I've asked AI to gather as much information about these 2 volunteers and produce a report, and that was sent to them on email. So to you, Anita, and to George, hopefully you got your reports on email. And yeah, I'd like to know your opinion of what you received.
Thanks, Umesh. Juanita, I don't know if you'd like to go first. I'm happy either way.
Sure, no problem. No problem. I have taken a look at it, Umesh. I don't even know what to say. It's quite frightening, actually. You know a heck of a lot about me. I think you actually know more about me than my husband does. The only thing that may be a crossover, I think, is that I know of two Juanita Bauers. So I know of myself, and I know of a Juanita Bauer that's a biokineticist. Now, one platform I'm definitely not active on is TikTok. So that account is definitely not my account. Piscot's Mule, Archive of Your Own, definitely not my accounts. I don't have accounts with them. So that's the good news. People are going to look for me then, they're not going to find me. But the data that you have provided is very correct. And it's things I've forgotten. I mean, conferences I did 10 years ago, I've forgotten about. I didn't even realize things stay out there for that long and they're so easily discoverable. Because what I did notice is you said this took you 5 minutes. And that, I think, is what is most frightening. So yes, there's a lot of accurate stuff in here. Anybody who's connected to me, be careful, because that's a threat. A threat. If I ask you for money, it's not me. I promise you it's not me. But yes, it's an eye-opener. I have to be very honest, it's an eye-opener. And some of the doors that you've given me as suggestions to close, like my private email being in public domain, I definitely will go close that door. I'm going to go find it myself and make sure it's not discoverable. So thanks, Umesh. I mean, I benefited now from your expertise. But to those in the audience, it's scary stuff when I read what Umesh could find about me in 5 minutes. George, I don't know how you found yours, but mine was scary.
I'm still reeling from the shock, to be honest. So if I understand correctly, I mean, what this has done is it's a digital footprint, and you've exposed what risk there is in the digital footprint. To Juanita's point, I've been amazed, and incidentally, you have found my profile, so there's not another George Thomas Wood, so it is me in this instance. But it's that key personal information and data exposure that I think I've sort of reeling from a little bit. It was the professional background scan was correct. So the vulnerabilities, to Juanita's point, around personal email address, emails, phone is publicly available, professional contacts available, a predictable schedule and travel patterns. Okay. Psychological levers, so the fact that the work I do is principally humanitarian in nature, and so somebody wanting to create a digital twin, if they wanted to, could quite comfortably do so. Yes, and then the positive observations, recommended actions, some of the cleanup activity I need to embark on, very, very useful exercise. So as I say, still reeling from the shock a bit, but I'll take some corrective action.
George, I breathed when I said no. I breathed when I read the part that said no financial data available.
Yes.
But I think if Umesh had to scratch, he probably would find something.
Yeah, exactly.
This was a first pass. This is just an initial scan. If someone wanted to find more information, they'd then take those individual links and usernames and accounts that was found and start digging into them individually. And then you never know what further can be found. Yeah.
I also thought it was quite useful in terms of the sort of hygiene program you recommend. So some of the cleanup actions to take to protect your digital identity, as it were. So I think that was incredibly helpful.
Correct. Another thing where I had made, or I have a fault, and I need to go and address, is that my social media channels are discoverable. They're not personal. They're not closed. Which, as somebody who's not particularly tech savvy, I think my generation gives me away. Not particularly tech savvy, I wouldn't know how to close them. So I'll go and look for one of my millennials or my Gen Alpha and ask them, please, just to help me. How do we close all of these social media panels that they're not discoverable by the public?
Okay, good. Thanks for that feedback. Yeah, so that was just a demo. And just to reiterate that the tools that were used were open source intelligence tools. It's freely available. It's manual, but it's not anything new. But what I wanted to demonstrate was now using AI, it takes the work, the manual work out of it. Theoretically, I could just put in names and it runs a certain pattern, produces a certain report, and that initial scan is extremely comprehensive. It can get deeper, but as George and Juanita, you've seen, and I think you're going to need a lot more time. There's about 600 lines in there in that report. You're going to need a lot more time to go through the detail. Yeah, so make use of it.
Umesh, if I can just add to that, if you don't mind, for those who don't know, you haven't seen the report. I think if I had to print this report out, it probably would end up being about, George, I think maybe 10 or 12 pages.
That's right.
Yeah.
I mean, Juanita, I didn't realize you and I were as interesting as we are.
I know. Phew. When I look back, I feel like a legend.
Indeed.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I think we can do some Q&A.
Sure. So thanks for making the AI conversation as interesting as what it is, Umesh, and so far, Juanita and George. It's good to laugh about this stuff. But before I go into questions, Umesh, just a few comments to reflect on. And I'm going to start with Andre Claessens, who says scary stuff. I felt the same. Listening to you, the exposure I've had to AI, and then, of course, the scary stuff generates a few questions. I'm going to get to that shortly. So, Andre, thanks for helping us there. A comment also from Royzanne reads, this makes me think about governance in a whole new way. If we're sending AI twins, quote unquote, or digital note takers into meetings, we'll need to update policies around consent, representation, and accountability. And AI agency becomes a real HR and ethics conversation as a comment, which leads to some of the questions, Umesh, that I've seen in the chat. One of those questions is, and Roseanne, if you don't mind me fielding the question on your behalf, scary stuff indeed. There's the echo to Andre. It would be great, Umesh, if you can share some high-level tips or hygiene actions for the group.
Okay. Obviously, there's the organization level, and then there's the personal level. From an organization perspective, if you look back at the model I put forward, you have to catch AI deployment at the beginning. When the idea comes about, someone saw something on TV or the internet or whatever, and they say, let's do this and change the way we do business. That's where it starts. As a business leader, you want to ask yourself, how do you use this in the best way possible to give you the required advantages? But at the same time, don't leave yourself open for those negative consequences. And then similarly, in your personal life, it's like when Google came out with the general search engine, there were people who were hesitant, and then it became the norm. Now with use of GPTs, etc., there's some hesitance, but I think for the most of it, people have gone fully into it and are using it in general now. The questions that you got to ask yourself is, how much of information are you putting where? If you put your personal information into a AI chat bot or one of these GPTs, where is that information going? Is it being stored somewhere? Is it in the cloud? Is it a local instance on your local machine? you ask yourself the same questions. So putting your information down on the internet, displaying your information, personal or business, should be very purposeful. And, until BSN, I've actively limited my social presence on the internet. And, it's just as a habit, you could make it a little bit more difficult for people looking for general information or personal information about yourself. Yeah, but I think this is a very wide discussion, and it would definitely motivate for a detailed breakout type of discussion as well.
Thanks, Umesh. I'm going to ask Gideon, and I'm sure there's context to the question. Gideon Okpo, if you would mind, or rather not mind, just coming onto camera and framing your question around personal information, I assume, being discoverable in the public domain. But Gideon, if you can come on camera and just position your question with us, please.
Yeah, thank you so much, Umesh. This is quite scary. Yeah. It's scary. Yeah, I wanted to know how we can, I know you mentioned the report, how we can make the email addresses and phone number non-describable, to public domain.
It's a long process. Unfortunately, if you are like me and you've tried to remove traces of yourself on the internet as much as possible, you'll find that your data, whether it's sold to companies and you find it on their databases, you ask them to remove it, they say there's a process, and then suddenly you find that it might be temporarily gone and then it comes back again. Or even worse, it is now showing up in more places. There are processes where you can unsubscribe from places where you've subscribed to, either willingly or not, or maybe I should say knowingly or not, as well as if you find your information, personal information, on certain websites or databases, they usually have some kind of process where you can ask for them to remove it, but it's not always successful. Let me put it to you that way. Also, all the information I have found in this example was in the public domain. I did not do a secondary, deeper view. Like I said, this was just the initial view, an initial scan of the internet, and that was the information that could be found. But if you go deeper than that, there is more to be found. There are things that can be tested. So if, for example, you might have usernames where someone with malicious intent can then try different passwords. And AI could help with that as well. Yeah, so for starters, if you just type your name in Google and look at all the places where you appear, you might find legitimate places where you want it to appear, but you also might find that your actual email addresses and phone numbers somehow show up on certain sites that you are not familiar with. And those are the ones you want to start cleaning up, probably in a staged approach. But it's slightly long-term. It's not a quick fix.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Gideon, and thanks, Umesh, for that one. Umesh, I think now might be a good time. I don't want to distract us all by you going into the chat to communicate with us there. There is a request to ask if you can please provide the link to generate these reports. What will be the easiest way, if you can share that with us?
There isn't one link. There's a number of tools. There's open source intelligent tools that usually ethical hackers use, but also normal hackers use it. And what I used was your general AI GPT, and I asked a few questions to just say, go and gather this information. And at the same time, I've run probably one tool in the open source intelligence tool set, maybe 1 out of 100 or more. There's a whole lot that can happen. And it's a process. The only reason I was able to do it so quickly is I knew what to ask the GPT and how to integrate it with a respective open source intelligence tool. So there isn't a click a button place to do that.
Thank you for that, Umesh. I'm going to, let's move to one of the other questions. I'm going to ask Ruan Botha to please come on camera. And Ruan, you are welcome to ask your question to Umesh directly as well, please.
Thank you, John. Much appreciated. Umesh, I just want to also know, looking at this extensive search you can run through open source AI, it's surely also a frightening ordeal if we can do the same in your competitive analysis. If you look at small businesses, just a website, the information it pertains. I'm in a school setting, so you need to obtain certain information. But now, what safeguards should leaders apply to prevent this misuse? Because I'm sure, like the lady said there as well, there's some information that's relevant and some of it that applies to a different person. But this is surely exposing a lot of information and data that could expose people, but also in a competitive analysis to use it more ethically. So what safeguards should leaders apply to prevent the misuse of this AI?
So I doubt we can prevent the misuse of the AI because the AI tool sets are readily available and open to anybody who's willing to learn. The deepfake I created was in less than 10 minutes, literally less than 10 minutes, on a free version, and it could get a lot better. The search I did, I didn't even review the results. If someone was searching with intent, they would easily find, information that's not correlating. So for example, in the reports I did, there was probably 5% of the information questionable, but maybe 95% or more actually true. So to prevent misuse of tools available out there, unfortunately, it's available for free. It's available for anyone who's willing to learn. There used to be a steep learning curve in the past, but with AI, it's a quick learning curve. A lot of this, what I've demoed, was really less than 10 minutes or type of work. So that's from the outside. So preventing the misuse of these type of tools externally is not practical. Internally to your organization, you want the right cybersecurity principles implemented. You want the right AI tools implemented and configured correctly with the right type of boundaries and limitations. So for example, currently I would assume, and I have seen in some small companies, small organizations, just as you use something like ChatGPT or any of the other brands out there, just as you use it in your personal life, you might want to create a document, you might want to create a report for your company, for your small business, and even in large enterprises. It comes down to an employee making a decision. And you have to have the right governance policies in place, firstly. You have to have the right training and awareness that informs the people in the organization saying, even though these things are available to be used, it should be used in a particular way. So for example, if you want your organization policies to be easily available and for employees to sort of summarize them, you do not want them to take all your company policies and upload it into an AI, right? There's more secure ways of doing it. You could build localized, ring-fenced type of systems where the data doesn't go out of your company, for example. So security around AI systems implementations is critical. And obviously, as you go to smaller and smaller organizations, these type of skills become too expensive. Yeah, I hope I've answered most of your question. It's a difficult question.
Thank you very much. I do believe it's exposing a lot of our companies and our professions, but I think policy-driven focus towards internal policies would be one thing, but like the ring fencing, I think also the data. I don't know if in internal cloud systems would be the option of ring fencing your policies, because a lot of people, you can access a lot of policies. If you look at school websites, you can look at all the policies and you can expose certain elements within structures. And yeah, that's surely going to make the outside world a bit more exposed to attacks, and especially hacking, creating fake profiles, damaging reputation. That's one thing we are definitely seeing happening more often. But thank you very much.
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks, Ruan. Umesh, let's juggle between a few comments and questions. Juanita would like to add a comment to what she provided earlier. Thank you.
Okay. So if Umesh has not scared you enough, I had 3/4 way read my report by the time that Umesh spoke about it. And I have to tell you, the most disturbing part of the report that is provided to me is not about my channel. It's not about my personal life. It's not about, because what happens in my personal life is one issue. What is most disturbing is that he was able to weave a web of everybody within the Business School Netherlands framework that has access or are decision makers in the finances of the company. So he's got that web, and he got that right. That is spot on. That's 100%. All the people that make the financial decisions all together or with one another, or needing authority from one another. So that he got pretty much 100% on spot, including cross-border. So it's not only in our main organization, but in all the organizations that are falling underneath the main organization, which is quite frightening. It also gave all the main decision makers that I interact with at various points in the different partnerships that we have, which is also extremely frightening, because an intervention there could be a discussion with a partner in changing everything around our agreement, and I would be none the wiser. And that part was spot on. The biokineticists, that's one issue that's in my private life. But on the BSN stuff, that was very spot on and very, very scary. And that information, as far as I'm aware, is not something we publish in the outside domain. But he was able to get to this information. Thanks, Umesh. That was really scary. So that one we'll have to look and see how we close those doors.
You can use the report to as additional value add in that way.
Thank you, Umesh. But just that everybody knows that that data is not made available publicly by BSN. But Umesh was able to find it in 5 minutes.
Thank you, Juanita. Umesh, can we keep you for a few more minutes? I think there are a few more questions here that we just want to work through. I think the topic is very relevant and interesting. Norman Setlogo, can I ask you to come onto camera, please, and pose your question? I think Juanita's comment links well with Norman's question.
Good afternoon. Thank you, John, for the... Umesh, my question is in sense of where companies now are developing their AI capability. how exposed are the employees? Because companies now, we using like company tools now, like you're using a laptop, and a lot of information, and some people will put in their personal information. How does that compromise an employee when companies are advancing AI? Thank you.
Thanks for the question, Norman. I think a lot depends on how the AI system in the company is developed. Because if employees or customers are using systems that are backed by AI or integrated with AI, the data that goes in needs to be mapped to the right places. If the systems were developed in a way that wasn't very responsible, it could be that the data going in, you think it's secure, but in the back end, it's going out of the company. And if there's the relevant security safeguards around that, then it's fine, as long as that was considered during the development process. But I do agree with your sentiment in the way that I think a lot of companies might be taking shortcuts, not considering all the security and ethical considerations. And from a data subject point of view, you might not know what's happening in the background. You deal with a user interface, you deal with a chatbot, you put your information in there, that has some automated processes and the data goes through to the back end. And in that back end, you don't know how far it goes. So that's the non-transparent part. So the obligation is on both sides, right? As a user of a system that might be using AI, as well as the maintainers, developers, maintainers of such systems, both sides of this fence have responsibility. You know, you could decide, I'm not putting my phone number or my, kids' health details on a certain system. But at the same time, the people who develop such systems should exercise the right duty of care.
Yeah, correct. Because as a follow-up, like yesterday, we spoke about health and well-being. And when you go for companies' health programs, you have to input into the system your health conditions and all of that. But we don't get visibility as to where that information is going to, because yes, it's good that the company is giving you access to do health assessment tests, but the confidentiality of that information sometimes becomes a compromise to the employee when the company feels that the employee is no longer productive. So an AI sort of like helps them to build up a database of incidents of the employee over time. So that could compromise an individual.
Yeah. So the use of that data, and remember, it's also collected, and there may be some kind of analysis and trending of your data, your physical condition, your behavioral patterns over time. And you might think that you've provided the data, now it's over and done with, but your data is residing somewhere. They might use it for training data later on, or they might make decisions about you that you're not familiar with why. So yeah, I know I'm not answering your question here, but it's extremely difficult to know what's going on in the back end. You might be putting in your health data and it might be a life-saving system, but you don't know in the background what's happening. And to a big extent, we have to rely on relevant governing bodies, governments, regulations, laws, etc., that eventually can help guide these type of things. However, you usually don't find about it until there's some kind of breach or some kind of unethical behavior, and then it's usually too late. And like I mentioned earlier, the relevant safeguards and guardrails and governance, because everybody is new in, well, not everybody, but I think it's a new field that everybody is jumping into. It's that eagerness, you know, it's like giving a child a dangerous toy, right? Everyone is very eager to use AI and the benefits of AI, but when things go wrong, then we learn, and you know, the relevant guardrails, governance, laws start changing to accommodate for those type of things. But there's usually a lag between usage or adoption of emerging technologies versus the relevant governance required around it. That's actually part of the reason why I wanted to create such a model. It's because there isn't a simple, understandable model that you can apply and make some quick decisions on. You'd be looking at frameworks with hundreds and hundreds of organizational and technical controls that you must implement, but you don't exactly know why, and you can almost be certain it is also lagging behind the reality on the ground of AI usage. So you got to apply a few simple rules of thumb. You know, if something doesn't seem right, think about it, ask the right questions, and ask for the right assurances by the people who are developing or managing such systems to get a reasonable level of comfort.
Thanks, Umesh, for that. Thank you for assisting with that one. I'm going to take two more, if you don't mind, Umesh.
Not at all.
Lovely. Thank you. Umesh, I think the one thing, if I read this question, I'll read it back to you now, but the one question that I've heard a lot is, you know, kind of, are people's jobs at risk with AI as we evolve in the use of AI? This question reads, how can organizations ensure that AI systems enhance human capability rather than replace it, especially in decision-making and creative work, as an example? How would you comment on that?
Yeah, look, I have an opinion on this. And my opinion is that if we don't, and I'm going to say as humans versus AI workers or digital resources, human resources versus digital resources, let's call it that. The digital resources will undoubtedly outperform the human resources in many tasks. And the more routine it is, the more manual and repetitive it is, the easier that job is not going to be done by a human anymore. And of course, with the advancing capabilities of AI, it's not just automating repetitive tasks. It has the ability to reason, think, and make decisions, which a company might have a certain watermark on. You might say, okay, we are okay with AI to take minutes of meetings, but operational meetings, not board meetings. You know, there's a certain watermark that every organization will start getting a certain comfort around. But there are a huge amount of tasks that each one of us have to think about. If it doesn't require much human intelligence, it can be done by an agent. Actually, I'll amend that. A significant amount of human intelligence applied to a job can also be replaced by the AI today. So my opinion on this is, as companies, we have a responsibility to being human-centered, the whole humanism part of the model. There's going to be an impact to every AI implementation. The technology guys are probably going to tell you as a business leader, I can make this particular area 90% more efficient, and you don't need 90% of the people to do what it's doing. My suggestion is there's a human responsibility that needs to be taken into account. That's the digital transformation part. It needs to cover this. It needs to say, okay, what is the impact of this new implementation? If that implementation says we don't need 10 people to do a job, it can now be done by 1 person or 0 people. It doesn't matter. There needs to be some kind of impact analysis. The company has, and again, this is my opinion, the company has a duty of care to its employees. It has a human responsibility to say, okay, how do we mitigate the impact of this solution? Everyone that will be impacted as part of an implemented AI solution should be considered for different tasks, different training, and different type of empowerment, because the trend will continue. If a task is very easy and an AI can do it or an automated process can do it, you got to lift your level of abstraction, lift it to a higher level, because it's now moved out into technology handling it. So as a human being, there are jobs we can do that are less tedious, are less manual, and it might involve learning, innovating, and reinventing yourself. But you would need to move the labor force that is impacted, I would say, would need to move to a new level of abstraction, but still be relevant.
Great, thank you. Apologies. Thank you, Umesh, for that. I want to, if you don't mind, just ask a practical question, which is something I'm pondering listening to you as well. And with this, we'll close off your segment. Thank you, Umesh. So you distinguished, if I listened correctly, you distinguished between minute takers in applications like Zoom and so on. You distinguish between a board meeting and an operations meeting. The board meeting, we probably wouldn't use the tool. In an operations meeting, we might be more comfortable using that. Are we at risk using these automated minute takers, regardless of what the meeting is, but of the minutes of that meeting being available for consumption somewhere in the ether without us knowing? And what should we be mindful of, if anything, around using these automated minute takers for any of our meetings, for that matter?
Yeah. Often when people, again, it's about efficiency, right? You don't want to take minutes. You want something else to do it easier for you. You want the easiest thing. And often in corporates, there isn't a enterprise guidance around the use of this. And so employees take it upon themselves to find things on the internet and automatically add it to meetings that are within the business. So you might find we're in a meeting now, and it suddenly says that Read AI has joined the meeting, or Jean has invited XYZ AI to join the meeting.
Correct.
And there's no control over that. You don't know where the data is going. The detail of the minutes is stored in the cloud outside your organization. So my suggestion is, if AI note takers are being used, it should be used within the confines of the enterprise infrastructure, and the data should be configured to be stored within the organization infrastructure. Now, the more freeware something becomes, okay, I might get some hate because of this comment, there might be less controls around it. You might have typical enterprise software that is also progressing along this journey. And you might get note takers that are being added to existing enterprise software. It might cost money, but there might be the relevant safeguards around it. So I'm not going to mention names, but they are out there.
Okay. Umesh, I'm sure there are so many more questions for today. The comments in the chat as well. We have to unfortunately break it here. Thank you very much for your time and for making us think. And I think the thinking pattern will continue as we get more familiar with AI and probably more comfortable with it. But it sounds like we shouldn't really ever be too comfortable with it, is my takeaway.
It's an ongoing process.
Absolutely. Umesh, thank you very much for your time and for your contribution.